Morning again. So today's talk title is a huge mouthful. Goodness, peace, mercy, justice, and truth. And I love it because it was actually it's an Ernest Holmes phrase that came out of the reading. And the vision that goes with that is we see a world of peace and harmony, enfranchisement and justice. And that is the vision. Enfranchisement simply means to set free or to give the right to vote. And to me, the right to vote is a right to choose. We always have a right to vote in our own life, right? Yes? We can live in the most totalitarian country, but we always have the right to vote in our own life with our own choice. Viktor Frankl, in his famous book, A Man's Search for Meaning, talks about being in the Nazi concentration camps. And as he was stripped of literally everything, his wife had been killed, his children, I believe, had been killed, and the Nazis were trying to get him to basically hate them. And he says, I chose not to hate them. I chose not to go there, no matter what. And so, what a challenge, right? And yet it's a challenge that we get to be faced with. And we look at the outer world at various times, and we want to get angry, and we want to get hateful, and we want to get blaming. And the choice is, can we instead make a different choice? So when Ernest Holmes talks about this goodness, peace, mercy, justice, and truth, he says that that is the will of Spirit. Can we stay in the will of Spirit? Can we rise above what looks like the darkness and stand in the will of Spirit and be the will of Spirit? See, it's our role to be the peacemakers. It's our role to stand and look at the same thing as everybody else and see something different and claim something different. That's the role of the artist. And Thomas Troward refers to God as being the creative artist, the great artist, and that we're involved in the great artistry. Can we look at the same thing that everybody else has a different view of and see something different? Can we see the Spirit there? And sometimes it's challenging, right? Sometimes it's real challenging to see Spirit in a circumstance. But it's our role to do that. It's our place to do that. So I want to talk about justice for a couple minutes. Gene Adams says, the blessings we associate with a life of refinement and culture can be made universal. In other words, what's good for us can be, everyone can have. The good we secure for ourselves is precarious and uncertain until it is secured for all of us and incorporated into our common life. Gene Adams was a late 1800s, early 1900s women's rights movement activist, helped with the suffragette movement, philosopher. And so what she says basically is none of us is experiencing justice until all of us are experiencing justice. We're in this together. This goes back to our concept of there's only one of us. So if one of us is not experiencing justice, is not living in that place, then all of us are not experiencing justice. So the good of life is for all. Spirit is everywhere present. The good of Spirit is everywhere present. Whether we remember it or not, it still is present. As many of you know, I came out of Seattle, and there's times in Seattle where the sky is just gray, oftentimes for weeks on end, right? If you've ever been there. And yet if you drive east a little bit into the Cascade Mountains, just the foothills of the Cascades, you get away from that big fog bank that sits there from the lake and rise up, and it's a beautiful sunny day. And I've experienced that. I love that. I've experienced it many times. And I would go out, I'd go hiking up in the mountains there, and by late afternoon I'd come back, and it's been beautiful, it's been sunny all day, get in my car and drive back down, and as I'm approaching Seattle, there's the gray fog bank sitting there. And I realized that there's a whole lot of people that experience the whole day as a gray day. Okay? And we can get caught up in the same thing if we don't move. And what's required here is a movement. In my case, it was a physical movement. What's required in oftentimes the case is a movement in consciousness to get out from under the gray cloud and to start to rise up to see the sunshine. Okay? And so that's part of the invitation, is that we start to look and see, what is it, when I get caught up in this, what needs to move, what needs to shift? So the justness of spirit, because spirit is everywhere present, the justness of spirit is everywhere present. It's been said that God is love and God is law. That's one of our core teachings here. God is love, God is law. God loves us no matter what. In fact, it's not even God loves us, as Emily Cady says. God is not a being that is loving. God is the love itself. We're immersed in a field of love. Isn't that cool? We're immersed in a field of love constantly. There is nothing we can do to get out of that field of love. Another one of my friends used to say, God is so dysfunctional, he loves us no matter what. It's a little personification of God, but we're immersed in this field of love no matter what. Our work is to remember that for ourselves and to see that for others. To let the blinders, to let the clouds of forgetting drop from our eyes and start to wake up and remember and say, you know what, wait a minute, time out. I'm immersed in a field of love. I was working with a person in counseling this week that was one of the things that they were working with is they were facing some choices. And I said, no matter what choice you make, you're still immersed in love, no matter what. Oh yeah. So sometimes we need that reminder. So justice doesn't come from laws, does it? Divine justice doesn't come from laws. See, when we talk about the law, it's the law of cause and effect, which simply is that what I put out into the universe, what I put out into the world, is what's going to come back to me in some form or another. Okay? So if I put out hatred, I'm going to get back hatred. Next week, our official talk title, is called Rose-Colored Glasses, and it's about the filters we see the world with. And so if I see the world with a particular filter, I'm going to get back that same filter. I'm going to see that and only that. If you ever put on a pair of glasses that are colored glasses, what you notice is the world looks that color, right? It isn't necessarily in reality that color, but it looks that color. Some of us have rose-colored glasses. Some of us have a little more grayish colored glasses. But the justice comes from the part that as I'm in the world, as I'm expressing in the world is expressing back to me. The justice is that as I express love, as I express the will of spirit into the world, into my world, into the world with others, I experience the will of spirit, which is just simply for love and for peace, truth, goodness, mercy, back. If I forget that and I'm expressing my ego's will, and oftentimes it's my wounded self's will into the world, lovingly, that's what's reflected back. It works for everybody, right? It's like gravity. Gravity doesn't care if you're good or bad. It works for you no matter what. It works the same for all of us no matter what, right? Okay? So justice, the divine justice, the infinite justice, doesn't come from laws. We've made laws, for instance, against racial discrimination, and yet it clearly persists today. So we can't legislate justice. Justice comes from the heart. True justice comes from the heart. Cicero, the Roman philosopher, said, extreme justice is extreme injustice. When we get carried away with getting too minute in our justice, when we forget the heart and go for just the head and the desire for revenge and all that, we perpetrate extreme injustice. So justice comes from the heart. When we begin to view our fellow beings, each of us, as one of us. When I'm looking at each of you and seeing myself, when you are looking at me and everyone else and seeing that there's only one of us, we start to have compassion. Is there anybody here who's never made a mistake? Anybody? I'm going to put my hand down too. Oh, you haven't. Okay, great. All right. Larry hasn't. I know Larry's kidding. I was dealing with somebody recently that went to jail for a particular crime, and one of the things he talked about was that almost all of us have done things that we could have at least gotten a ticket for, if not arrested for, somewhere in our lives. And through whatever reasons we may not have gotten caught, but we've done things. We've done stuff. And hopefully some of you have done a lot of stuff, so it's more fun, right? All injustice is based on a belief in separation. All injustice is based on a belief in separation. It's based on a belief that I'm separate from God, and so therefore I have to do activities that are not in alignment with my highest good and with the truth of God. It's based on a belief that you and I are separate. And so therefore I can do something else. When we fail to see our oneness, we start to objectify the other. And so I don't see you as a human being, I see you as an object. I've asked myself this week, how could anybody take a semi and drive it through a crowd in Nice, France? How could anybody do that, watching people just, die? And the only answer is that person had objectified those people. That person was not seeing people. Okay? And so that person was deeply involved in and engaged in the belief in separation for whatever reasons. When we objectify the others, then we can create fear and we can create justifications instead of justice. I can justify why I treat somebody else badly because I no longer view them as one of me. Are you with me? Yeah. Okay. When we do that, we can do anything to the other. I remember the Cold War began to end, not necessarily because of Reagan or Nixon or Clinton or anybody else back there. The Cold War really began to end when the Russian people and the American people started to intermingle and get together and suddenly saw each other as human beings and saw that the Russians were as scared of the Americans as the Americans were scared of the Russians. We began to say, wait a minute, this doesn't work. This person is a lot like me. They're not some evil big commie over there looking to take over my country. They're just like me. They live their lives the same as I do. They have the same hopes and dreams and fears as I do. And so when we start to see the humanity of each other, when we start to look at another person and say, this is an aspect of myself. This is another expression of God. I want you to make eye contact with somebody in the room here and just notice who they are. And take a moment to really make eye contact. We're all one. All of us are one. When we forget that, we can make people inferior, we can make people superior to us. I had a workshop with Jean Houston this past week, a one-day workshop, and she talked about going to gurus, and she said, just spell the word guru. It says G, U-R-U. And that's the lesson that any guru will ever give you. G, U-R-U. And helps us to come back to the truth of who are we? We are. But we forget that. So in our history here in America, we've labeled African Americans, we've labeled Native Americans as savages, right? Yes? Not necessarily us today, not necessarily us sitting here in this room, but in our history, we've labeled them as savages. And so guess what? We can take their land away from them, we can enslave them, we can do whatever we want to. Religions label those who don't follow their path. Here are some labels for you. Gentile, infidel, atheist, non-believer, and I'm a true believer, and you're not. Cult, that's us, by the way, too, a lot of true believers. Okay? We label other people, and then we can make them separate, and then we can do whatever we want to them. We're watching that with transgenders right now. They're not like us. Oh my God, they're just so not like us. Yeah, actually, they are. They're just us. So right now we're seeing the effects of separation. We're seeing it in bombings. And bombings aren't new. Remember the 4 school or young girls who were killed in the church bombing in Martin Luther King's time in the 60s. Okay? So doing this kind of stuff it's nothing new. It's just, right now there's more video cameras trained on it and more cell phones trained on it, and we're actually watching what's happening, but it's always been happening. We're seeing shootings, we're seeing planes in the building, we're seeing the trucks driven into the crowd. because we don't see others as people. We just see them as an enemy or somebody different from us. And once they're different from us, we get scared and we start acting out from our fear. Our work in the middle of this is to not buy into the fear, to not buy into the separation, to not buy into, oh, it's those kinds of people over there. Jean Houston says we're in a process of deconstruction for reconstruction. Deconstruction for reconstruction. So in Seattle, there used to be a building called the Kingdome. Anybody kind of aware of that? It was our kind of large stadium there. And it got to be, when it was first built, it was kind of really cool. It was new and like that. But 25 years later, it was out of date. And they were going to build a new baseball stadium there. And so what was the first thing they had to do in order to build a new baseball stadium? They had to destroy the Kingdome, right? I, along with many, many other Seattleites, got to watch it happen. I was on a particular viewpoint and watched it, they did the whole little dynamites and imploded the building down and huge clouds of dust arise and stuff like that. We had to deconstruct the building. If you're going to build something new, the first thing you have to do is clear out whatever's there before, right? If you want to build a fresher consciousness, you have to clear out the stuff that's in the way. Yes? Okay. So we're in a process collectively of building a new consciousness on this earth. And part of it is we have to see what already exists, what's already here. And that's what we're looking at right now is what's already here but has been kind of hidden and under the ground. Right now it's all up in our faces and it's painful. It's painful, right? It hurts to look at some of the things that we're seeing on TV and on the news media and from our Facebook friends and all. It's painful to see that in operation. But it's already existed. And we're getting to redo the same story that we've had before, and we have the opportunity to create a new outcome. Because this stuff has been existing for a long time, right? I mean, thousands of years. And we have the opportunity to take, in this particular time, to take and look at that, look it straight in the face, and create a new finishing story, a new outcome from it. To say, no, we're not going to continue to do war and hatred and killing and viewing others as separate. I'm not even willing to see the shooter or the bomber or the truck driver as separate from me. I'm willing to recognize that those people are as much God as I am, completely having forgotten it perhaps, but still just as much God as I am. Can I open my heart and see that person that way? And the thing is that when we open our hearts to others, when we start to see them differently, have you ever met a person who held you in a certain light, either high or low? And didn't you notice that you tended to, around that person, act how they held you? You acted to the level of how they viewed you. I remember as kids, you'd watch if the teacher had labeled you as a troublemaker, guess what you were? And even when you weren't making trouble, you were still what? A troublemaker. And the teacher wouldn't let go of it. And if there was any trouble that happened at all, even if you didn't do it, guess who the first person was they went to, right? Because you were labeled the troublemaker. Okay? Can we shift our reputation, the reputation we put out on other people? Can we stop calling them troublemakers? Can we start to see them as God beings? Even if they've forgotten it, even if they don't know it. We've also seen studies of where, in blind studies, teachers have children that they're told are really exceptional children, right? They're really bright students. And they start to treat them that way, even though going in they weren't. And they come out and they score much better than they ever have before because they have a teacher who holds them in a high light. Can we hold the entire world? Yeah, even those people, whoever those people are for each of us, can we hold even them in the high light? Can we see the truth of who we are? Who all of us collectively are? In order to create a new outcome, we have to create a new process. Because we've, throughout history, labeled friend, enemy, us, them, good, bad, Gentile, Jew, Muslim, infidel, true believer, non-believer. We've labeled this. If we continue to do this, we'll continue to create the same old story. Can we start to drop it? Can we as a community, can we as a conscious group stop doing that labeling within ourselves? Can we look at that and say, I'm going to think something different. I know what I thought in the past. I'm going to think something different. Yeah. Just like Viktor Frankl, we think something different in the same circumstances as everybody else. So when we label others, where else do we label others? We label an other within ourselves, because there are certain parts of ourselves we consider our own enemy. There are certain parts of ourselves that we judge and shut off and don't want to look at and don't want to be friends with. And yet that part of ourselves is an honest part of ourselves. It's an authentic part of ourselves. And the only way we'll bring it out of the shadows is to make friends with it and let it come to the light and let it be safe to come to the light. Cynthia just got back from a week at the teen camp. And in the teen camp, the teens were able to, because they were held in such a high consciousness, open up and allow some of the pain and the hurt and the suffering to be expressed and to be released and to be let go of, so that they could move into greater love for themselves and each other. Can we be a place that does that internally in ourselves and then for other people? Can we be a place that holds ourselves, first of all, in the highest love that we can hold ourselves in? Can we love ourselves no matter what? And then can we start to look at the world and say, I may not agree with that person. I may not like what they're doing. I may recognize that they've probably forgotten that they and everybody else around them is God. And I am choosing to not forget. I'm choosing to look at that person and still see God. Still see that they and I are still one. Because every one of us has forgotten we're God at some point in time, right? I know for most of us it was a long time ago since the last time you forgot that you were God. For me it was, about an hour ago? And, can we see that in ourselves? Can we see that in each other? Can we start to have a compassionate form of justice? Can we bring the light of love into everything? So there's a wonderful old story that many of you may remember from your childhood of Aesop's fable, The Sun and the North Wind. Anybody remember that one? So the sun and the north wind are having a contest. They see a traveler on the road, and they say, which one of us can get that guy's cloak off first? And so the north wind says, I'm going to blow that guy's cloak right off of him. And so it huffs and puffs and comes blasting through, and the harder the north wind blows, cold north wind, the harder the traveler hangs on to his jacket, right? So finally the wind blows itself out, and finally the sun says, let me try this. And he just radiates love and light and warmth on this traveler. And pretty soon off comes the coat, and he's patting his forehead. There was a video I saw. It was a story of a man who, by his own admission, grew up as a racist, hardcore racist. His daughter, unfortunately, got pregnant with an African-American man. And he had this biracial grandson. He said when that first happened, he wanted to go grab his gun and shoot people. But he said after a while, he noticed that this little grandson didn't see him as a bigot, didn't see him as a racist, was just sitting there loving him. The kid was just loving him. He just saw grandpa, right? And he said, I couldn't maintain my belief system, my what I had learned in the face of that love. I couldn't do it. Today, he's adopted 2 African-American kids, he and his wife, for their own. They're helping to give them a greater chance. And his own little grandson now is like about this tall from the video, and a young man of his own in his early 20s, I believe it is. And he said, it changed me completely. The love of that child changed me completely. See, we have to learn to be bigot. We have to learn to be racist. We have to learn almost everything that we know. So if you ever look, I've got, as many of you know, a 5-week-old grandson. He doesn't sit there and go, I like this person, I don't like that person. This is a good person, this is a bad person. He doesn't do that. He just sees people. Can we be like that? The thing about love is it's not instantaneous. We always like instantaneous solutions, right? Oh, there's a problem, let's go fix that quick. Okay? Love isn't a quick fix. It takes a while. It takes a while. But it is, in the long run, the only solution. It melts the hardest of hearts. If we can hold that heart in love, if we can hold that person in love, it's like the ocean, working away at a rock. And the rock looks so hard, and each and every day it is really hard. And yet, each and every day, little by little, the ocean is working away at that rock until it finally gets through it, right? And so that's how love can be. Are we willing to be lovers in this world? Yes. And lovers of ourselves in this world? So our practice this week, first of all, is to practice loving everyone. Everyone. Was that clear? Was that every? That means everyone. As a spiritual practice. Again, you don't have to like them. You don't have to agree with them. You don't have to go to lunch with them. You don't have to be their friend. You don't even have to be close to them. If I've got somebody with an assault rifle who's forgotten that he's God, I'm not going to be close to that person. I'm going to be in the opposite direction as fast as I can go, okay? But I'm still going to recognize that even if that person has forgotten and is very wounded and very hurt, that they are still God in form. And from a safe distance, I'm going to love them as who they are. Because it's the only thing I can do. And then secondly, look where we've created otherness or separation, either within ourselves. What parts of me have I pushed off and said, that's my enemy? That's an enemy to me, instead of loving it. And what part of otherness have we created about other people? Where did that come from? Where do we define it? And can we shine the light of compassionate love all the way through that whole process, including ourselves, being in compassion for our own judgments about ourselves and other people? Can we hold ourselves in love? So that's our spiritual practice this week. Number one, love everyone. Just take it on as a spiritual practice. Just say, this week I'm going to hold each person I meet in love. I'm going to recognize them as God. Whether I like them or not, whether I disagree with them or not, I'm still going to hold them as this is God in form right in front of me. And then secondly, to look where we've created that otherness or separation within ourselves and between ourselves and other people, and start to take that wall down. Are you willing to play with that this week?
Yes.
Yeah, great. What I know is as we do this, it lifts everybody. It may not look like it. It may look like, well, I'm just, doing this little thing of there's this, grocery clerk that I really don't like and bugs me every time, and today I'm going to just hold that person in love. And it may not do anything apparent at the start, but trust me, it ripples. You'll create an effect in the world more powerful than you know. I'm going to close with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. And this is from a speech he gave at the Holt Street Baptist Church on the 5th of December in 1955 during the Montgomery bus boycott speech. He said, "There is another side called justice. And justice is really love in calculation. Justice is love correcting that which revolts against love." Can we be a place of love that corrects that which revolts against love? Let's move into prayer. And so knowing that there is one presence, one and only one infinite presence, one life, only one. And that presence is love. That presence is the infinite good. That presence is the love, the mercy, the peace, the justice. That presence is all of that right here, right now. It doesn't change. That presence never changes. It is always pure love, pure light, pure life, pure good. And because that presence is infinite, that we and every single other form of life, including the planet itself and the galaxies themselves, are one of that infinite presence. We are expressions, radiations of this infinite intelligence. We are expressions of this one love, of this one life. This is the truth of who each of us and everyone else is. Whether we remember it, whether we forget it, whether we act contrary to that or not, we still are that. And so I speak my word that this week we rise above the cloud of grayness that hangs over the collective consciousness right now and stand in the light and shed our light of love. Allow that light of love simply to come through us. We don't even have to make it happen. We just let that which is already present come through us. We are just conduits of the love of the universe. We allow ourselves to simply be that conduit throughout every engagement, throughout every interaction that we have this week. We remember it for ourselves. We remember it for everyone else. We allow ourselves to be a place where that conduit of love, that light, that warmth, shines into what sometimes can be a very gray world. We remember who we are and support others in remembering who they are. And so for this, I'm grateful. For each person who is saying yes to this, for each person who opens up to any degree and allows a little more of that light and love through them this week, I'm ever so grateful. Even if we don't do it perfectly, but let a little bit more in, I'm ever so grateful. For the release of judgments of ourselves and others, I'm ever so grateful. And for the Spirit that moves through all of this, the infinite love that moves through all of this, I am ever, ever so grateful. And so I release this word into law, knowing that it moves into form and expression perfectly in our lives, right here, right now. We simply say yes, we let it be, and affirm it by saying together, and so it is.